page 36 of our paper 2 notebook, and we're into Act 3, Scene 2 of King Lear. And this is the first of the 3 storm scenes. I suppose if I was you, and I was, I'm laughing because you're glad you're not me, and I was reading this play in school, and I had, a teacher who was reading every line of the play, I suppose this is the bit that would be torture. The poor Tom scenes and the storm scenes, they're hard to read, they really are. So what I tried to do here is simplify what happens in the scene, boil it down to what's important. You can leave the joy and the pleasure that you take from reading the play until you're kind of maybe a bit older, especially these difficult scenes. So as usual, the summary part here that you can see on the screen in front of you, that's for you to read yourself. I've highlighted a couple of things. This is a storm scene. The storm is, significant. It's unprecedented in scale. We'll see a quote here that shows that, and that represents the scale of the disorder in the kingdom brought about by Lear's abdication. We can also see that the storm represents the extent of the significance of the storm is it mirrors Lear's psychological breakdown, represents his the breakdown of order in his mind brought on by the consequences of his abdication. And of course, as I mentioned in the video to the previous scene, he was reported calling for an apocalyptic end of humanity. And here in this scene, we'll see that as well. We see the powerful sense of ingratitude and injustice that he feels, which is somewhat ironic given the fact that he is the perpetrator of much injustice at the start of the play. But of course, we get this kind of little change through his suffering. This is the transformation essay that you're going to have to write at some stage this year for your teacher. Through his suffering, he begins to change, and our perception of him begins to change. And it's in this scene that he first kind of really admits, and he can see that, at least in part, the events that have occurred are his fault. So this sense of him a tragic hero, somebody who has qualities that we admire, which are undermined by his fatal flaw. This is a scene in which it's important in the analysis of him as a tragic hero. I just want to mention something here really quickly. King Lear is a kind of a weird tragic hero, because if you look at Macbeth or Othello or Hamlet, say take those 3 guys, they start off the play and we kind of admire them, we kind of like them, they're noble, and then their fatal flaw undermines their character, and that leads to tragedy. Lear's the structure of this play is slightly different. I think it's really interesting. Lear starts off the play as a deeply antipathetic, dislikable or unlikable, character. We've discussed this at length, I won't go into it now. And by the end of the play, he's quite likable. So his journey is slightly different, but regardless, he's a character possessed of qualities that are there to be admired, and whose greatness is undermined by his hamartia. Don't forget that word, I don't like it. Just use fatal flaw. They both mean the same thing. They are synonymous of each other. So let's have a quick look at the key quotes from this scene. So here he is, one of the great monologues. This is a monologue, don't forget, not a soliloquy, because he's saying these words out loud. Other people can hear him. And he says, "Blow, winds, rage, and crack your cheeks. Rage, blow." And then he calls for the cataracts and hurricanes to spout till you have drenched the steeples, drowned the cocks. So, the imagery is really fiercely impactful. Like, Shakespeare's doing a magical job here, bringing, this imagery of what Lear wants to life. So the storm is really significant, but Lear wants it to be magnified in size. He wants so much rain to fall that the churches will be, that the rain will cover the highest part of the church. And if you're living in Shakespeare's world, if you're living in 16th century, 17th century England, the highest building in most towns or villages will be the church steeple. So if so much rain falls, if there's such flooding that it drowns or drenches the steeples and drowns the cocks, well, that's apocalyptic. That's the end of the world. Nothing can survive that. So he's calling for the end of the world. And one of my favourite lines from this part of the play is where he asks the gods to smite flat the thick rotundity of the world. It's brilliant images. So we have this image of the world as round, and he wants it flattened. And again, why does he want it flattened? Because his personal world has come to an end, and he can't understand how, the world can continue without him. This is as a result of his egoism and his self-importance. But he'll soon be cleansed of that. A very important quote for language and imagery, and don't forget language and imagery is a key concern when you're doing your preparation for your single text, is Kent's famous description of the extent of the storm. I can never get this right without stumbling, so I'll try, maybe this will be the first time. Such sheets of fire, such bursts of horrid thunder, such groans of roaring wind and rain, I never remember to have heard. It's just wonderful. The onomatopoeia of thunder, of groans, of roaring, the sibilants in such and sheets and such and bursts. It's the repetition of such. The storm, Kent is saying, in his whole life, Kent is not a young fella. He's probably the same age as me. He's a man of middle age. Kent has never, in all his life, never seen a storm like this. So this is the ferocity of the storm, the extent of the storm. It's unparalleled, it's unprecedented. And of course, this is Shakespeare talking about, using figurative language. Yes, in the word of the play, there really is a storm. But this is him using symbolism. The extent, the unparalleled, unprecedented extent of the storm has never been seen before in Kent's life, because for Kent's whole life, there has been stability in the kingdom because Lear was the king, the God, divinely appointed king. Now that Lear has abdicated and created the disorder, Kent can't believe the extent of the disorder, so the storm reflects the effect that Lear's actions have had on the kingdom, and also reflects the extent of the mania in Lear's mind at this point. But as I said in previous videos, remember, even at the height of his madness or at the height of his emotional strain, Lear, and this is one of the things we really like about him, he comes up with these quiet, reflective moments of insight. Here he says, in a moment, yes, it is self-pity. He says, I am a man more sinned against than sinning. Now, what does that mean? It's open to interpretation. Essentially what it means is, look, I'm a victim here. I've been sinned against. I haven't been treated fairly. So he's feeling sorry for himself. But the very fact that he says than sinning is an admission that he has sinned. It's an admission that he has erred. It's an admission that he is fallible. And that is a step along the road to Lear's transformation. The fact that he can admit, say out loud, I made a mistake, I was wrong, means that he is changing fundamentally from the man who he met in Act 1, Scene 1, and throughout Act 1. Finally, and again, sorry for just loving this too much. Imagine I'm getting paid to do this. I love my job. Kent spots poor Tom's little kind of jerry-built hovel, some sort of fucking built with branches and, hay, whatever. It's a hovel. And Kent brings Lear to this hovel. And he says, gracious, my lord. Even saying gracious is important, because gracious means like he's God's anointed. He says, gracious, my lord. Hard by here is a hovel. And this is the line. This is the line. Some friendship it will lend you against the tempest. Some friendship it will lend you against the tempest. And the word I nearly said erroneously was shelter. Because what he's saying is it'll offer you some shelter from the storm. Shelter from the storm. Bob Dylan, right? Sorry, just had that in my head. And of course, this is again where the physical and the metaphysical, where the world of the literal and the world of the figurative merge in the play. Because Kent is saying this, actually, look, there's a physical structure here. It's not much, it's quite meagre, it's a hovel. But if you go in there, you won't be exposed to the terrible extent of the storm. And of course, the word friendship is used there. See the word friendship? Because what Kent is doing is, he's lending shelter to Lear. The very act of going out to help Lear is offering him shelter from the storm. So there is a figurative meaning to that literal event in the play. And again, that adds a depth and a richness and just makes the play so much more interesting for old losers like me. Okay, that's Act 3, Scene 2.